Okay, so could you start by telling me a little bit about your current role as Associate Vice President of Academic at Technical College? Specifically, what are some of your key responsibilities and how does FERPA compliance play a part in your day-to-day work?
You were breaking up the last part of that. Can you repeat the last part?
Yes. Specifically, what are some of your key responsibilities and how does FERPA compliance play a part in your day-to-day work?
So, well, I have two roles. I'm dean over arts and sciences, business, CIST, and professional services. And I'm also the associate vice president of academic affairs. As dean, as far as actually in both roles, it's an administrative role. So my job is to make sure that I understand not only legal requirements but ethical considerations, and I have to understand compliance as far as standard procedures through SAC COC, through state policy, through the college's procedures that are based on those policies. And FERPA is a very big part of that because, as you know, FERPA is the federal legislation that protects student records, and it's our jobs as deans and administrators, and even as department chairs, to make sure that faculty understand that student information is confidential. I mean, really, the only kind of information that you can divulge is directory information, which is basically student's name and their email address, that kind of stuff, unless they've declared that information as confidential. But it's our job to make sure that faculty and staff are protecting student records, and the laws in those areas can be very confusing, particularly when you're dealing with high school students. So yes, that's what I do, and those are my responsibilities. And again, with FERPA, I mean, we deal with it every single day.
This is my introductory question, but you actually went into the first.
Oh.
So what are the most significant challenges that educators face when adhering to FERPA regulations in a blending environment?
Well, I think there's two parts of that. I mean, the first part is making sure that educators understand all of the complexities of FERPA. There's some things you can do, there's some things that you can't do. And then when you add in the blended learning environment, you run into challenges with sometimes instructors accidentally divulging student information. So again, faculty should understand all of the requirements of FERPA, but they don't necessarily do that, no matter how many trainings they go to, no matter how many orientations they sit through, no matter how many times we talk about it. And even us as the administrative group, we're constantly referring back to the laws to make sure that we're interpreting it correctly. But I think, so understanding the regulation is probably the biggest challenge. But then in the learning environment, or the digital learning environment, you have that extra you have that extra bit where, as a college, we have to think about how we're protecting student records that somebody could inadvertently access. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of information that's in Blackboard and that's in Banner. And if somebody has a student's login information, they can access that information. And so, the college is constantly struggling with how do we keep up with making sure that that information is secure. And of course, the latest thing that we've used is Okta with, not only single sign-on, but with two-factor authentication. And as much as it drives everybody crazy having to verify this and verify that and go to your phone and type in codes, I mean, all that's designed so that somebody else can't access somebody else's information when they're not supposed to.
How does 7% ensure that the educators are trained in both FERPA compliance and ethical decision making?
Well, a lot of that is handled through the onboarding process. When new employees are hired with the college, they have to read the FERPA. They have to read FERPA law. They have to sign something that says that they understand it, and then at professional development meetings, we remind people about FERPA. Student Affairs does FERPA training fairly frequently. I believe the registrar sends out information about FERPA every year to the faculty and reminds them of that. The ethical considerations, I think that's something that's handled through conversations. I mean, typically if we're talking about something FERPA, it's typically a dual enrolled student, and the faculty will say, hey, this kid's parent wants to know this information about what's going on in the class, and what am I allowed to tell them? Well, the answer is nothing. You're not allowed to tell them anything. But if the kid's in trouble, then you do have an ethical responsibility to share that information. Not if they're in trouble academically, but if they're in trouble, personally. So you have to kind of figure out where that line is. You can have a conversation with a parent and not reveal information that's contained within the educational record. And I think that's where that ethical line is. So I don't ever refuse to talk to a parent. I'll talk to parents all day long. But if they want to know specifics about the student's educational record, then they have to sign a FERPA waiver. If they want to talk about, the college and, the way we do things, I can do that all day long.
So when you're teaching professional development, there is a training module that is completed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Professional development. There's modules that are done frequently.
Right. Have you encountered situations where FERPA compliance and ethical considerations conflicted? And if so, how are they resolved?
I think kind of we got into that in the last question a little bit, but you have parents all the time who are asking what's going on with their kid. And if the kid is an adult, that's easy. It's like, yeah, that's none of your business. So, if you want to know about how your kid's doing in school, talk to your kid. Where things become a little more complicated is when it's a high school student who's taking, classes with us. There's certain times where you can share information, and there's certain times when you can't share information. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is to work through the high school, because we can share information with the high school, and the high school can share information with us. And if we share information with the high school, then the high school's free to share that information with the parent. We are not. So, there's ways to get around some of these compliance issues and conflicts with ethical consideration, but they're resolved on a case-by-case basis. If for example, we know that, just yesterday we had a situation where a student was like, I'm going to kill myself, I'm on suicide watch and I can't fail this class and blah blah blah. So the ethical consideration there is this kid says that they're going to harm themselves, so we have a responsibility to act on that. And we have to act through student affairs as mandatory reporters. We have to report that to our police department. The police department goes out and does a welfare check, make sure that the person's okay. And we can do all that stuff without revealing information about the student's educational records. So they're resolved on a case-by-case basis. But typically it's going to involve multiple departments, typically student affairs, and sometimes campus police.
What tools does the institution provide to support that?
Did not hear one word you just said. Can you repeat?
What tools or resources does the institution provide to support faculty in managing student data ethically and legally?
That one's pretty easy. I think that, like I said before, the college invests heavily in technology to make sure that student records are protected. And it's not a one-time investment, it's a constant investment. The tools are changed frequently, but Banner is our main source of student records. But the other source of student records is Blackboard. And both of those tools are designed to make sure that people can't get in there and access information that they're not supposed to be looking at. But yeah, those are the tools really that we use. Faculty have access to training and to training modules, and if they have questions, they can certainly go to their supervisors or student affairs. The registrar at the college is the one who's officially responsible for FERPA and maintaining FERPA records, and making sure that if we have a FERPA waiver on file, that it's notated in the student's account. So the registrar's office will frequently give information about FERPA as well.
I think you answered this question with your last answer as well. How does the use of digital tools and online platforms impact FERPA compliance practices at your institution?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's just we use tools that are industry standard. We're not using some homemade learning management system. We use state-of-the-art two-factor authentication to make sure that the person who's accessing the record is the person who's supposed to be accessing the record.
Just a few more items.
Okay.
What are some common misconceptions about FERPA compliance among educators that you have found?
Well, there's probably a couple of things in there. First of all, people seem to think that FERPA only applies to, grades and transcripts, but it actually covers everything, with the exception of this, like I said, of that directory information. So the complicated part of that is because all of that information is protected, it's all on a need to know basis. So, for example, if two faculty members are talking about a student, if they both are teaching the student, they can have that conversation. But if a faculty member is having a conversation with another faculty member about a student that they're both not teaching the same student, then that's a FERPA violation. And I think that faculty don't necessarily understand that as well as they probably should. So, FERPA covers those casual conversations that we have as colleagues. There are, like, if your child goes to school here, you cannot look at their records and ban it. You cannot log into their Blackboard course. You can't do any of that stuff. You can't go in and register them. All of that stuff is protected too. And I think that people don't necessarily understand that also.
Right.
So, like, if Savannah were going to school here, you couldn't log into her account, even though you would technically have the ability to do so. So anyway, I think it's just, I think that people don't understand that it really is student information is need to know. Does this person that you're sharing this information with need to know it? Now, that doesn't mean that faculty can't have conversations in general. You can talk to your colleagues and say, hey, I have a student and this is the situation. The problem comes in when you say, I have, Stephanie Jones in my class and she is failing. And nobody needs to know that information. So anyway, I think those are the most common misconceptions.
In your experience, what are the best practices for fostering a culture of accountability and ethical decision making in managers?
I mean, I think that starts at the top. It starts with leadership. You have to have a president and vice president. You have to have deans who all believe in protecting student information, and who exhibit the behaviors, and demonstrate behaviors that show that the college takes FERPA seriously. And I think that's probably the number one best practice. And then probably the next best practice is to have regular training, including interpretation of FERPA laws with situations, because it is complicated. And then having an open door policy and making sure that faculty and staff know that they can go ask anybody at any time for clarification on FERPA and how to be in compliance with it.
How does the institution assess the effectiveness of its FERPA compliance training programs?
I mean, honestly, I don't know the answer to that. that would, that would be something that Chris Daniel could answer for you in institutional effectiveness. The FERPA training is handled by HR, and it's also handled by the registrar's office. So I'm sure that they, if I were going to guess, that they, they look at making sure that everybody completes required FERPA training. They probably look at those little mini assessments that are included within the training, where they have the quizzes and report on that kind of stuff. And then, the other thing that I would assume that they would do is try to have some hard data on any time where FERPA compliance was, or where FERPA was not in compliance. But again, I honestly, I don't know.
What advice would you give to educators striving to balance legal compliance with ethical responsibilities in their day-to-day practices?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if I were giving people advice, and I do give them advice all the time, and that is that those two things go hand in hand, compliance and ethics. And you have to make sure that you are following the rules. But at the same time, you need to know what kind of information you can share with other people. And you need to know that you do have an ethical responsibility for the well-being of students. And if they're in danger in any way, then that is information that needs to be shared with the appropriate people who can provide, the services that are necessary. And, at the college, that's, Candace Buckley and her team, and campus safety, Lemmy and his team. And when those people need to be involved, then they need to be involved. If it's a high school student, then, having relationships with the counselors, having a relationship with Drew Todd and his staff, the folks that are working with the high schools, and making sure that, that everybody is aware of any sort of potentially harmful actions that may be going on. And then knowing who you can share the information with. So it's really about making sure that that faculty understand the rules, understand the law, and know that if they have questions, then they should clarify them. And they should also know that anytime we as administrators come into a situation involving FERPA, we usually go back and reread the law to make sure. And we look at the policy, almost every single time.
Okay. Well, I do want to thank you for taking the time to share your expertise and insights today. Your perspective on the compliance and ethical responsibilities has been incredibly valuable, and I truly appreciate the thoughtfulness of your responses. As the next steps, I will be analyzing information from this interview along with other data that is collected for the research projects. The final findings will be compiled into a report and expected to be completed by December the 24th. If you'd like, I can share a summary of the findings with you once the project is finalized. Let me know if there's a preferred way to follow up with you. If you have any other thoughts or questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me. And
okay. Well, thank you. It was fun.
I appreciate.
Good luck on the paper.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later.